At 6:12 a.m., a golf cart in full HOA camo with cup holder, clipboard, and a dangling lanyard of laminated violations hit my ranch gate for the fourth time and died with a fizzing whimper. When we all heard the pop, the neighborhood thought it was thunder. I knew it was the moment Trina Paladino finally met the fence. My name's Gavin Ror. I moved to Cottonwood Reserve for two things: silence and sky. I keep to myself, fix my tractors, grill at sunset, wave to kids, nod to dogs. Then Trina, self-appointed enforcer, actual HOA secretary, and full-time binocular enthusiast, decided my Western aesthetic clashed with her Tuscan cul-de-sac vision board. She called my ranch gate aggressively rustic. I called it a gate. She started small with notes about non-compliant hay bales and a warning that my wind chimes exceeded the approved tone palette. Then came the drive-by inspections. If my gate was shut, she'd claim it violated community openness. If my gate was open, she'd say it endangered decor cohesion. Twice a week, her golf cart bumped my fence like a mall cop testing a revolving door. Neighbors said she'd park at dawn to film my mailbox existing incorrectly. Someone caught her with a tape measure, stretching it across my driveway like she was rebuilding Rome. When I asked her to leave my property, she waved a laminated map and said with a condescending tone that everywhere is HOA. The harassment escalated week by week. She filed complaint after complaint about the color of my barn doors, claiming the weathered wood violated the neighborhood's mandatory earth tone specifications. She measured the height of my grass with a ruler she kept in her golf cart's glove compartment, issuing citations when it exceeded 3.5 inches. One morning I caught her photographing my trash cans at 5:45 a.m. because they were visible from the street for 15 minutes longer than the HOA guidelines permitted. She recruited other board members to her cause, holding impromptu meetings in front of my property where they'd point and whisper like they were planning an invasion. The vice president, Harold, would stand there nodding while Trina gestured wildly at my fence posts, apparently explaining how their vertical orientation was somehow aggressive toward the community's horizontal design philosophy. One night, Trina accidentally loosened my gate latch, an incident I caught on my security cam where she was whispering open concept to herself, and the next morning I found tire ruts deep enough to hide a corgi. That afternoon, she called the sheriff to report my dangerous farm apparatus. The deputy watched the footage, sighed deeply, and suggested I secure the perimeter like any normal rancher. So I did, legally, posting 6 warning signs and installing a low-voltage livestock deterrent right along the interior fence line. Trina, in response, filed a cease and desist written on HOA letterhead and, for flair, carbon copied the county, the power company, and what looked like her hairstylist. The document was 12 pages long and cited regulations from 3 different states, none of which were ours. She hand-delivered copies to every house on the street, telling neighbors with a grave tone that I was creating a public safety hazard. The next day she organized what she called a community safety walk, which was really just her leading a parade of confused residents past my property while she pointed out imaginary violations. She claimed my fence posts were leaning at a menacing angle and that the gate's hinges squeaked in a way that lowered property values. One brave neighbor asked her if she had actual proof of any violations, and Trina responded by pulling out a binder the size of a phone book filled with photos of my property taken from every conceivable angle. She started calling contractors, pretending to be me, trying to schedule fence removals. I had 3 different companies show up confused, holding work orders with forged signatures. One contractor took one look at the situation and told me with a chuckle that in 30 years of business, he'd never seen someone so determined to tear down another person's fence. He gave me his card and said to call if I ever needed a witness. 2 days later, Trina stormed the gate at sunrise, aiming her golf cart like a battering ram, and the fence politely zapped a hello. Nothing dramatic, more insult than injury, but her cart hiccuped, stopped, and emitted a wheeze that sounded like it regretted ever being leased. Sheriff's deputies arrived. So did a county inspector and an HOA attorney who kept blinking like he wanted to resign mid-blink. We walked the line examining posted warnings, approved equipment, and time-stamped footage of trespass. The deputy turned to Trina and said with barely contained frustration that this is ranch property and you can't ram it with a parade float. The county inspector took photos of the warning signs, counting them out loud to make sure everyone heard that there were 6 clearly visible notifications about the electric fence. Trina stood there, her hair slightly frizzed from the static, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver. She kept insisting with an increasingly shrill voice that the HOA bylaws superseded state agricultural codes. The attorney whispered something to her, but she waved him off and pulled out her phone, frantically scrolling through what she claimed were precedent-setting HOA cases from Nevada. Then the coup de theater happened. Trina produced a printed emergency ordinance she'd emailed to herself from the HOA account at 3 a.m. declaring all gates temporary and illegal. The attorney checked the metadata, paled visibly, and gently took the paper like it was a baby opossum. The county inspector cited her for tampering and reckless endangerment. The deputies added trespass, filing false reports, and because of the doctored ordinance, fraud. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. Neighbors appeared in robes and slippers, phones aloft, narrating like courtroom sportscasters. Someone started a live stream that got 2,000 viewers within minutes. Trina's golf cart got towed while she stood there shouting about her constitutional right to inspect property boundaries. The HOA board held an emergency meeting on the cul-de-sac while Trina sat on the curb, mascara quietly emigrating down her cheeks. The board members huddled together, occasionally glancing at Trina with expressions ranging from embarrassment to relief. Harold, the vice president, actually apologized to me, admitting with a sheepish tone that they'd all been too afraid to stand up to her. The treasurer pulled out a calculator and started tallying up the potential legal costs of Trina's actions, his face growing paler with each number he punched in. The sheriff's department had to call for backup, not because Trina was violent, but because she kept trying to issue citizens' arrests to anyone who disagreed with her interpretation of property law. She actually tried to perform a citizen's arrest on the county inspector, claiming he was trespassing on HOA-regulated land. The inspector just stood there, bewildered, while a deputy gently explained to Trina that she couldn't arrest government officials for doing their jobs. More neighbors gathered, and someone brought out lawn chairs. It became an impromptu block party centered around watching Trina's downfall. The local news showed up after someone's live stream went viral. The reporter tried to interview Trina, but she grabbed the microphone and started reciting HOA bylaws until the news crew politely retrieved their equipment and focused on interviewing the neighbors instead. The attorney revealed that Trina had been secretly funneling HOA funds into what she called a property compliance enhancement account, which was actually just her personal savings. The audit showed she'd spent nearly $15,000 of association money on surveillance equipment, including night vision binoculars, motion-activated cameras specifically aimed at my property, and a drone she'd registered under her cat's name. The forensic accountant they brought in said with professional amazement that he'd never seen someone document their own embezzlement so thoroughly. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. They had 67 instances of trespassing, all captured on my security cameras. They had the forged documents she'd created, including fake violation notices with fabricated statute numbers. They even had recordings from her own surveillance equipment that she'd accidentally set to upload to the HOA cloud storage, showing her planning what she called Operation Rustic Removal while eating breakfast and discussing with her reflection how she would finally put that cowboy wannabe in his place. Her lawyer, clearly exhausted, tried to argue that Trina suffered from what he called excessive community dedication syndrome, which the judge said with a dry tone was not a recognized legal defense. When Trina tried to stand up and object herself, claiming she had a binder of evidence about my violations, the judge reminded her that she was the defendant, not the prosecutor, and that her binder had already been reviewed and found to contain mostly photos of my fence from slightly different angles and a bizarre collection of paint chips she claimed proved my gate was the wrong shade of brown. The courtroom gallery was packed with neighbors, all of whom had their own Trina stories. The judge had to call for order twice when people started spontaneously applauding after each charge was read. Someone in the back actually started a slow clap when the prosecutor mentioned the golf cart ramming incident, and Trina spun around with such fury that she knocked over her lawyer's water glass, soaking the defense table and her remaining documents. By the end of the week, Trina was suspended permanently from the HOA, fined $12,000 for property damage and legal fees, ordered to pay restitution of $15,000 for the embezzled funds, and sentenced to 300 hours of community service cataloging non-compliant landscaping at the county landfill. The judge also issued a restraining order requiring her to stay 500 feet from my property and banned her from owning, operating, or being a passenger in any golf cart for 5 years. When he announced the golf cart ban, Trina let out a wail so piercing that the court reporter jumped and accidentally typed a string of random characters into the official record.